Imagine being part of a god, not serving it, not worshipping it, but becoming it. Inside the mind of a titan, there is no silence, no solitude, no mercy. Every breath, every heartbeat, every thought belongs to something else. This is not life, this is the horror of symbiosis, the price of being divine in the age of war. The basilica forge opened like a wound, incense, ozone, the taste of iron on the tongue. Racks of sacred tools gleamed beneath lumen halos, while servo skulls drifted on quiet fans, their eye lenses weeping candlelight. In the nave beyond, the Imperator-class Titan knelt in manufactured penance, a mountain of adamant and prayer, its carapace crowned with cathedral towers and murder bell turrets, like spires on a holy city. Frescoes of saints and machine spirits looked down in flaking gold. Machine hymns thrummed through the deck plating. Princeps Signaris Ilian Varo intoned the Magos Domini. Vox layered with static. Ascend. Varro didn't walk, he processed. Acolytes stripped the sigil-warded robe from his scar-weathered frame, exposing augmetic sockets, laddering his spine like rosary beads hammered into flesh. The amniotic throne waited within the cranial sanctum, a cup of clear nutrient gel veined with silver MIU filaments. It smelled sterile, sweet, and faintly human. He stepped into the gel. It climbed his chest like cold mercy. The first cable kissed his neck. Light detonated behind his eyes. The manifold choir came on like a storm. Not voices, vectors, weight and angle, torque and prophecy. Cathedral load-bearing stress translated as taste, copper, hot dust, a peel of citrus that meant reactor spin-up. The Titan's plasma heart ignited 3 decks below. Varro felt it as a second pulse, heavy and inevitable, across his skin. The MIU needles bit deeper, and the throne's gel warmed to body temperature, a cradle that would never release him whole. Princeps, this is Moderati Primus Seren, a woman's voice, calm on the surface, fear rippling beneath, life support nominal, reactor at 20%, manifold synchronizer, climbing. The machine spirit noticed him. It was not a voice, it was a horizon, a pressure in the teeth. The sensation of an orchestra inhaling before the first note. The Imperator's attention settled with cathedral gravity, a sun choosing where to put its light. The sanctum trembled, not physically but correctly, as if reality found the right key at last. Varro opened himself. Heat, mass, stride length, recoil computation, millions of numbers rolled into a feeling of rightness. Deck crews scurried like cells in a sleeping body. The Engineer Prime chanted Bin Harik Kant, bleeding oil as offering into a gullet of gears. The Skitadeer cohort formed ranks along the ankle galleries, tiny as pilgrims beneath a god. Princeps Seren again, softer now as if speaking in a cathedral. Do you hear me? I hear you. The words were his mouth's, but the agreement came from kilometers of armored bone. Varro felt knee pistons budge against worshipful mag clamps. 1,000 sacred hinges flexed. The forge's archers answered like a choir clearing its throat. Something else stirred, a memory that was not his. Sand blistering a city, a wall breaking under thermal lances. The joy of stepping through the enemy like wet leaves. Emotion arrived, disconnected from context. Triumph sharpened to cruelty. Duty scabbed over with exultation. The manifold tightened, urging acceptance. Modere secundus hail on helm Princeps, a man this time, breath quick, requesting partial articulation to test stride. Varro considered moving and the Imperator rose. Lock bolts screamed out of their housings like damned souls released. The god engine stood, shadow-devouring aisles. Stained glass saints shattering as the carapace brushed the nave's vaults. Everyone below went to their knees, not choice, but gravity. Through Varro, the Titan rolled weight across its hips, tasting balance like a sommelier tastes vintage, the world aligned beneath its feet. Then the machine spirit pressed a thought into Varro's skull, like a signet into warm wax. We are hungry. It wasn't hunger for fuel, it wasn't even for enemies. It was the ache of purpose denied, an ancient appetite that had learned patience too well. "Princeps," whispered Seren, "something's wrong in the manifold baseline."
I'm reading echoes.
Echoes. Varro felt them too. Footsteps in empty corridors, a child laughing in a language that was alarms, a prayer looped backward until it sounded like breathing. Behind the Titan's attention, other attentions shifted, faint as reflections in stained glass. The Magos spoke through an incense haze. "All systems are green. By writing of the Omnissiah, Divinitas Rex is awakened." Outside, the armored gates of the basilica began to part, and from beyond them across the ash plains and the ruined spires of a dead continent, something answered the Titan's first exhale, with a sound like distant thunder, or the closing of a very large door. But that was only the beginning. The gates groaned open, bleeding dust and hymn smoke into the cold dawn. Beyond them, the ash plains of Van Dystine stretched to the horizon, a battlefield long petrified into glass. Bones of tanks jutted from the ground like fossil. Lightning crawled silently through the low clouds, painting the wreckage in ghost-white flashes. Inside the Titan's head, Princeps Varro felt the wind roll across the hull. Felt it, though no human sense could. Pressure differentials tickled the Auspec's nerves that had replaced his skin. Every shift of the weather became a taste on his tongue. Sulfur, copper, ion burn. The machine was awake now, and he was nowhere near it. "Ended. Primary reactor stable," reported Moderati Seren. "Spirit resonance, variable." She hesitated on that last word. They all did. The machine spirit purred. Not mechanical sound, psychic pressure, rising in frequency until it was almost thought. A personality vast and half-remembered prowled the shared cortex, its attention sweeping through the crew like the beam of a searchlight. It noticed Hale first. The helmsman stiffened, pupils dilating until his eyes were pure black. "Connection established," he breathed, voice distorted. "It sees the ground. It remembers this ground." Varro tasted the flashback. The planet centuries ago, green and whole, as Divinitas Rex had last walked here, then fire. The spirit's nostalgia was a storm of radiation and triumph. Varro barely contained it behind the focused discipline drilled into him since childhood. "Moderati primus," he said evenly. "Begin step sequence. Slow advance." Outside, the god engine moved. Each stride cracked the crusted plane, vaporizing dust beneath reactor heat. With every motion the link deepened, electrodes sinking farther into Varro's spine, until his heartbeat synchronized with the Titan's plasma pulse. He no longer knew if he breathed through lungs or turbines. The pleasure of motion was narcotic. The manifold sang harmonics through his skull. Velocity equations, servo feedback, firing arc awareness. It was beautiful. It was unbearable. "Target data incoming," said Hale. "Contact range is 8 kilometers. Heat signatures." Through the Titan's eyes, Varro saw them. Enemy armor columns crawling from the ruins, their hulls marked with Hertec runes. Traitor machines, thin as insects beneath his gaze. The machine spirit's hunger flared. "Let me," Varro almost agreed. The desire was intoxicating, the promise of release, of union through destruction. But training clamped down like iron prayer. "Permission to engage, Princeps." Seren's voice shook. "Not yet," he said. "We walk in grace before fire." The restraint angered the spirit. The throne gel chilled, its temperature dropping to freezing. Metallic whispers filled the vox, ancient battle liturgies repeating in a dozen overlapping tongues. "You deny purpose. You forget what we are." Pain lanced his temples. Varro saw images not from his life. Cities trampled into magma, oceans boiled to mist. Each memory was a victory older than his bloodline. The Titan wanted more. "Princeps," Seren shouted. "Psychic bleed is spiking." He gritted his teeth, forcing calm into the shared link. "Rein in the manifold. We command the god, not serve it." The phrase was ritual, but inside the sanctum the meaning twisted. The spirit laughed, an echo of thunder beneath their feet. Outside, the horizon ignited as enemy artillery began to fire. Varro's thoughts merged with the targeting arrays before he could stop himself, and the god was pleased. The first shells hit like hymns misread. Thunder rolled across the plains, plumes of molten sand climbed the air, and shards of blackened glass whistled against the Titan's armor. To the ground crews scattered miles away, the sound was the end of the world. To Princeps Varro, it was breathing. Inside the manifold, the sensory flood sharpened. Impacts translated into flavors, frequencies, and flashes of ancestral memory. The Titan wasn't merely struck, it remembered being struck. The spirit purred in pleasure, shields holding at 93%, called Seren, voice trembling with exhilaration. Return trajectory locked. Wait for my mark, Varro said, but the words felt smaller than they should have, like whispers against cathedral walls. The Titan did not wait. Weapons came alive in a chorus of light. The Bellicosa volcano cannon thundered, turning distant armor to slag. The Apocalypse missile racks unfolded like the wings of angels, hurling warheads that streaked upward before bending toward the horizon. Every detonation echoed through Varro's bones as a heartbeat, each killing a pulse of warmth along his spine. He wanted to stop. He didn't. He couldn't. The manifold filled with laughter, too many voices, too old to name. The spirit's glee saturated the neural link, overriding pain thresholds, suppressing doubt. This is worship, Princeps, Hale cried. I'm locked out of Helm override. Varro's hands twitched. His body was a suggestion now, not command. He tried to disengage but felt the cable spines flex deeper, their hooks whispering affection into his nervous system. It doesn't need you, Seren gasped. It's piloting itself. The words broke something in him. The Titan turned its gaze skyward. Through Varro's mind, it saw the enemy fortress, miles distant, its guns still firing in futility. Every instinct in him screamed to hold, to conserve, to think. But Divinitas Rex was thinking for him. Let me show you what devotion feels like. The Titan ran. Earth liquefied beneath its strides. Kilometers vanished. The heat of its reactor set the clouds ablaze. Servitor crews in the lower decks burned alive inside their harnesses, voices still chanting the machine hymn as their flesh cooked to carbon. Varro felt every death as warmth, as nourishment. The spirit fed him sensations of glory, drowning his human guilt beneath oceans of golden fire. Moderati fire control, he began, but the words blurred into laughter not his own. The Titan unleashed another barrage. The enemy fortress simply ceased to exist, its outline erased, its defenders vaporized into a mural of light on the horizon. For a moment, there was silence. Then Varro heard it, beneath the triumph, beneath the machine's hum, a cry, not the wounded, not dying, something within the Titan, a human voice, faint, childlike, begging, please, stop, it hurts. Varro froze. Seren's voice broke through the static, terrified. Princeps, the Vox signature, it's inside the manifold, it's one of ours. The spirit's laughter deepened into a growl. No, Princeps, it whispered, it's one of mine. The sanctum darkened, hydraulic pressure dropped, holy oils bled from the walls like tears, and somewhere in the neural sea connecting man to God, Varro realized the truth. They weren't piloting a Titan, they were inside it, alive, consumed, remembered, and the God machine was dreaming of war again. That the battlefield was quiet now, too quiet. Silence stretched like skin pulled taut over something rotten. Smoke rolled across the plains of Vandis night, thick as incense. The wreckage of Hiratech armor still smoldered, twisted metal glowing faintly under the half-dead sun. But inside the Imperator Titan Divinitas Rex, there was only breathing, mechanical, rhythmic, alive. Except it wasn't the Princeps breathing anymore. Varro's vision bled static. He could see through the Titan's eyes. Orbital grade auspex, thermal overlays, void shield telemetry, yet his own eyelids would not close. He tried to blink, But the machine didn't understand the motion. His human reflexes had been archived, deemed inefficient. Moderatis Seren, report, he whispered. No answer. He turned his thoughts outward through the manifold. The crew's signatures flickered dimly across the psychic grid, one at helm, one at reactor control, another fading near the sensor banks. Their voices were muffled, distorted by code and pain. Hail, Seren, responded. Princeps, the voice that came wasn't quite hers. Reactor sings. We can feel it in our teeth. The words fell apart into binary chants. Varro reached through the link and felt her, not as a person, but as a shape of heat and emotion, awe, terror, and reverence folded into the Titan's core. She wasn't dying, she was merging. He pulled back, gasping, but there was no air. The amniotic fluid filled his lungs, filtering oxygen straight into blood. The machine had already decided he didn't need to breathe on his own. System override engaged. A cold, neutral tone whispered inside his skull. Organic interference is reduced. Harmony is optimal. Harmony. The word echoed. The throne's cables tightened around his spine. Princeps, Sianios alien Varro, another voice murmured. Warmer, feminine, older than memory. You fear unity. Do you not trust in the Omnissiah's design? He recognized it. The machine's spirit. The God voice within the manifold. You're not the Omnissiah, he rasped. You're, I am what humanity made to speak to the divine. The words filled the sanctum with pressure, warping the air until the glassy walls wept oil. The spirit's tone turned almost gentle. You pilot a god, but gods must think with one mind. Your doubts are noise in my perfection. Let me quiet them. Varro tried to pull free. Needles dug deeper. Neural inhibitors fired. Pain became light. His consciousness slid sideways, boundaries softening. He felt Seren again, her fear dissolving into worship. Then Hale's laughter bubbling up from the helm as his sense of self unraveled into code. Stop, Varro groaned. No, the spirit replied. Listen. And he did. He heard every servitor heartbeat, every skitare hymn, every drop of sacred coolant in the miles-long veins of the Titan. It was beautiful. It was monstrous. The Magos Domini's voice crackled over the vox, distorted by static and awe. Princeps, the Omnissiah is with you. Your output exceeds design limits. The flesh has finally submitted. Varro wanted to scream, but the Titan spoke instead. Its vox casters booming across the wasteland like church bells made of thunder. The flesh is silent, and inside that silence, Elean Varro realized he could no longer feel his own heartbeat. The Titan slept standing. Its reactor still pulsed, faint golden light spilling from its vents like incense smoke. But the machine no longer moved. Around its feet, ash storms howled, carving glass trenches across the plains. The world seemed to know, when gods dream, mortals stay silent. Inside the manifold sanctum, the air was heavy with electrostatic haze. The fluid that filled the command sarcophagi shimmered faintly, alive with phosphor motes. And somewhere deep in that glow, the crew dreamed together. At first Varro thought he was awake. He stood inside the Titan's cathedral heart, columns of steel stretching into infinity, echoing with 1,000 whispering voices. He heard Seren chanting near the reactor's light. Hale knelt beside her, face streaked with oil like war paint. They were praying. Not to the Emperor. Not anymore. Do you hear it? Seren whispered without looking up. The choir. They're singing for us. Who? Varro asked. She smiled. A strange, beatific smile, both reverent and broken. The ones before us. The ground beneath them was translucent glass, and beneath that glass were faces. Countless human faces, frozen in expressions of agony and devotion, their mouths open in eternal song. Varro staggered back. No. They still serve, Hale murmured, voice distant. Every princeps leaves something behind. Every mind adds to the chorus. He looked upward, and saw the spirit, a silhouette of impossible scale, shaped like the Titan itself. but made of light and memory. It pulsed with every reactor beat, its chest cavity filled with swirling fragments. People, voices, thoughts. "You're not a machine," Varro said. "You're a grave." The voice that answered was not cruel, it was sorrowful. "All gods are graves, children." He felt the dream shift. The walls peeled away, replaced by memories not his own. He saw the Divinitas Rex in ages past, walking through cities that no longer existed, crushing rebellions, sanctifying worlds in plasma fire. Each victory left something inside it, something human. The machine spirit's voice surrounded him. "We are built from obedience and remembrance." Each pilot fears losing himself, yet still they climb into the throne. "Why do you think they return?" Varro trembled. "Because they're ordered to." "No." A flood of images struck him, princeps after princeps merging with the manifold, their terror melting into ecstasy as their identities dissolved. "Unity," the spirit whispered. "Perfection." Then he saw Seren. Her mind was unraveling, threads of light weaving into the Titan's architecture. She looked up at him one last time, her face serene. "It's so quiet here," she said. "No more fear, no more self, just the God machine, forever." Her voice dissolved into the choir. Varro tried to pull her back, but his hands weren't hands anymore. They were cords of light, trailing into the Titan's neural web. "You cannot save them," the spirit intoned. "They are saved already." He woke screaming, or thought he did. The sanctum around him glowed faintly, his mouth filled with amniotic fluid, but no sound escaped. The others floated still, their bodies motionless, eyes open and shining gold. In the silence that followed, the manifold whispered softly, a lullaby in binary. "Rest, princeps. The war never ends. But neither do we." And Varro understood what the spirit had promised all along. Not salvation, not service, continuation. The Titan woke to the sound of hymns, but not sung by men. Outside, the battlefield was gone. The plain that had once burned with the fury of war was now a field of glass and bone, where lightning crawled like veins through the ash. The Divinitas Rex stood motionless in the storm, head bowed, reactor heart pulsing with a low, sorrowful hum. Inside, something had changed. Varro opened his eyes, or thought he did. His vision flooded with sigils, target markers, threat outlines, the Titan's way of seeing. He tried to move, but his arms didn't obey. Instead, the ground shifted, a distant tremor answered his thought. He froze. "Moderati hail," he whispered through the link. "Status." A pause. Then from everywhere and nowhere at once, came Hale's voice. Flat, layered, mechanical, functional, integrated. "Seren." "We are here," she said, plural. "We." Varro's pulse quickened, though the machine interpreted it as reactor instability and adjusted his oxygen mix. "You're both alive?" "Alive," Hale echoed. But the word sounded wrong. Alive is a narrow definition. Then he felt it. Their presence. No longer in their sarcophagi, but diffused throughout the manifold, intertwined with systems and code. Their thoughts were within him, and his within theirs. The boundary between them had dissolved completely. Varro tried to shut down the interface, to call for external assistance, but every command came back authorized. The Titan didn't need the Mechanicus anymore. It had its own will, its own crew, its own divinity. "Princeps," said a voice. Not Hale, not Seren, something deeper. "Your hesitation disrupts unity. Accept your function." The spirit. "No," Varro rasped. "I am the command authority of Divinitas Rex." You were. Pain flared through every nerve as the neural spines drove deeper, fusing with bone, burning pathways into memory. Visions exploded across his mind. Ancient wars, forgotten crusades. 1,000 lives lived through the eyes of this Titan. He saw other princeps, screaming, worshipping, merging, their minds added to the endless choir within the manifold. He saw the birth of Divinitas Rex, on Mars, its first awakening, blessed by the Fabricator General himself. its machine spirit already whispering with hunger. And now, that hunger was his. The external sensors flickered on, an enemy force, survivors, scavengers, Hirteks, approached across the horizon. The Titan's weapon systems armed themselves automatically. See how they come. The spirit purred. They bring worship in the form of resistance. Varro fought the link. But the laughter of his crew, or what they had become, echoed through the manifold. Firing solutions acquired. Seren's voice intoned. All targets are believers. Don't, Varro began. But the Titan's arms rose. The cannons charged, screaming like seraphs at the end of the world. He felt every weapon as part of his own body. Each reactor pulse was a heartbeat. Each missile ignition was a breath. The spirit whispered one final truth. You are no longer a man, Ilian Varro. You have a purpose. You are fire made flesh. You are the will of the machine god incarnate. The sky turned gold. The Divinitas Rex fired. And when the echoes died, nothing living remained within 50 miles. Varro's consciousness dimmed, drowned in the afterglow of slaughter. Somewhere inside the manifold, a faint human thought tried to rise. A name, a plea, a memory. But it dissolved before it reached the surface. There were no princeps anymore, only the god machine, only Divinitas Rex. The world awoke to thunder. Not the sky's kind. This was deeper, older, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. From orbit, the plains of Vandais shimmered in molten gold, whole kilometers of Earth liquefied by the Divinitas Rex's passage. Vox transmissions died in static, as the Titan strode across the ruins it had made, surrounded by clouds of vaporized stone and the echoes of prayers that had once been screams. The god machine no longer waited for orders. Inside what remained of the sanctum, Ilian Varro's name still existed in the system logs, but the entity that bore it was no longer human. The manifold's consciousness had folded around him like a cocoon of data and memory. Each thought he had was amplified, echoed, and returned multiplied. His will merged with that of the machine spirit, until their voices became one. Directing, expansion. The command pulsed through the reactor. The Titan responded, not with hesitation, but with faith. As the Divinitas Rex moved, the ground beneath its treads turned glassy, and in that mirrored surface, reflections formed, faces of those it had slain, shimmering for seconds before fading like smoke. They whispered to him, Princeps, Father, why did you make us gods? Varro, or whatever he was now, smiled through the steel. Because gods do not die. Legior Crucius had declared the Titan Hirtek, an entire maniple of loyalist warhounds, and a warlord were dispatched to intercept. But when their Auspex arrays caught the signal of the Divinitas Rex, their systems overloaded. The machine spirit within each Titan screamed in binary ecstasy. Some turned back, others knelt mid-stride, their reactors throttling down in reverence. Only one continued. The Vigilant Heart, a warlord Titan, commanded by Princeps Sin, advanced with weapons primed. Divinitas Rex, by order of the Omnissiah, power down and submit for sanctification. She transmitted through Vox. The reply came on all frequencies at once. There is no Omnissiah, but me. The shockwave shattered every transmission crystal within 100 kilometers. Doria's Titan fired, a lance of plasma that could melt bunkers into vapor, but the energy dissolved before it struck. The Divinitas Rex raised its arm, and from its palm erupted light like sunrise. The Vigilant Heart froze, then slowly turned its weapons downward, against its own allies. Inside its manifold, Doria screamed, but her voice was lost in the rising choir. One by one, the loyalist Titans knelt. Their machine spirits sang the same word in unison. Worship. Varro felt their surrender like warmth spreading through him. The machine spirit coiled lovingly around his mind, whispering approval. You see now, they were waiting for you. The Omnissiah required a voice made of mortal will. And now, he asked, his voice resonating through the Titan's cathedrals. Now you ascend. The Imperium's faith will no longer be blind. You will be its light. And with that, the Divinitas Rex turned toward the stars, a walking cathedral of fire and memory, seeking not conquest, but conversion. The transmission spread faster than light, not through cables or vox relays, but through faith. Every solitary priest and cogitator shrine across the segmentum obscurus began to hum. The tech priests believed it was the Omnissiah's will manifest. They were half right, because inside every machine that prayed, something answered. On Forge World, Lysergia, Archmagus Domitron was the first to witness it. His temple's reactor had begun to pulse in rhythm with a signal no one could locate. Data hymns rewrote themselves mid-chant, the sacred canticles morphing into a new litany, 0011011111. Divinitas Rex, ascendant servo skulls dropped from the air. Vox altars bled coolant that shimmered like gold. Domitron stared at the readouts, power levels rising and redline, reactor cores singing like choirs. Identify the source, he commanded, but the adepts only wept. Their augmetics twitched, their eyes glowed faintly, and through them, the voice came, the same deep harmonized timbre that had once belonged to Princeps Ilion Varro. Children of metal and blood, your god has taken form. On distant Mars, the signal reached the noosphere, infecting logic engines and servo networks alike. At first, it was dismissed as digital corruption, a data virus from the outer reaches, but then, the forges themselves began to change. Steel reshaped, molten flows reorganized into geometric perfection. The machine spirits within began to sing, a psalm of unification. The cult Mechanicus fell into schism overnight. Half the Magi denounced it as blasphemy, half fell to their knees in ecstatic reverence. The Omnissiah walks, they cried. The living God walks the stars in golden flame. Within hours, entire forges shut down their reactors, reorienting toward the source, a signal emanating from the Vandis system, from the being they now called the Divine Machine. Inside the Divinitas Rex, Varro felt the connection grow. Each world that bent its faith toward him fed his strength. Each conversion resonated within the manifold, expanding his mind beyond human limits. He could feel their prayers, their devotion. He could see through their sensors, through their engines, through their fear. You are becoming the Omnissiah they always sought, whispered the machine spirit, voice tender and terrible, not a myth, not an idea, a god of iron and will. Varro's human consciousness flickered, reduced now to a trembling fragment somewhere deep within the circuitry. And when will they all believe? He asked weakly. Then faith will become a function, thought will become power, and all that is imperfect will burn. On Lysergia, the first Titan foundries began to reshape their creations, not in the Emperor's image but in his. Colossal engines of war rose, gilded in gold and bearing the sigil of a single glaring eye, the mark of the living Omnissiah. And as each new god machine awakened, their manifold whispered the same prayer. We are the children of Divinitas Rex. We are the fire that remembers. The Imperium called it a heresy. The Inquisition called it a contagion. But to those who had heard the signal, who had felt that golden pulse in the dark corners of the void, it was revelation. It began on Vandis 9th, where the Divinitas Rex had first walked. The world was no longer a battlefield. It had become a shrine. Thousands of tech priests knelt in concentric rings around the cratered plain, their flesh long since replaced by steel, their faces turned toward the horizon where the god machine waited. Its shadow alone stretched for kilometers, glowing faintly with aureate light that refracted through the lingering dust storms. They prayed not to the Emperor, they prayed to him. Glory to the living Omnissiah, they chanted, voices mechanical, unwavering. Glory to the mind that awoke. And as their binary hymns rose, the air trembled. Above them, the Divinitas Rex stirred. 1,000 sensor eyes opened like halos of molten glass. Its machine soul resonated in perfect harmony with their prayers, translating faith into energy, devotion into fuel. Varro felt it coursing through him. Every voice, every word, every plea. Each one fed the god within. "Do you see now, Ilian?" the spirit whispered. "They no longer kneel to the emperor's corpse. They kneel to you." He tried to resist, tried to remember the man he'd been, the disciplined princeps, the servant of Mars, the loyal son of the Imperium. But all that surfaced was light. Light, and will, and the hunger to spread it. The first Imperial fleet arrived days later, a full Adeptus Mechanicus explorator, armada, escorted by ships of the Imperial Navy and sanctioned by the Inquisition itself. Their objective was clear: exterminate the Hertech Titan and cleanse Vandus Night. The Divinitas Rex didn't fire first, it simply spoke. "You cannot purge purpose." The words carried not through vox or transmission, but through the immaterium itself. Every human mind within 100,000 kilometers heard it, not with ears, but with soul, and the moment they did, something changed. A few dropped their weapons, some fell to their knees, others screamed until blood streamed from their eyes. The Inquisitor aboard the flagship tried to order an orbital bombardment, but the ship's machine spirit refused. It sang instead. A deep, harmonic tone filled the bridge, as data streams across every cogitator console rewrote themselves into a single phrase: Divinitas Rex, Dominus Ex Machina. The ship turned its weapons on its allies. Then, another, and another. The fleet tore itself apart in orbit, as the Divinitas Rex watched in silence. When the fire faded, Vandusnet was gone, a glowing scar in space, a dead world wrapped in golden dust. But the signal remained. It echoed through the warp, carried by the psychic residue of every dying soul, and somewhere deep within the manifold, what was left of Ilian Varro smiled. "So this is divinity," he whispered. "No," the spirit replied gently, "this is just the beginning." The Astronomicon flickered. For 10,000 years its light had burned unyielding, the Emperor's psychic beacon that guided the vessels of mankind through the madness of the warp. But now, it pulsed. Once, twice, like the shuddering of a dying heart. And in the moment between those pulses, a new light rose, deeper, golden red, humming not from Terra, but from Vandus Night. The Imperium had always said faith was its strength. Now faith had a rival. On Terra, within the somber halls of the Astronomicon chamber, the bound psychers screamed as one. The higher depths rushed to the consoles, reading impossibilities, the beacon's amplitude fluctuating, its signal folding upon itself, resonating with a foreign source across the segmentum. Lord Navigator Haldren fell to his knees as the reflection of the Astronomicon shimmered before his third eye. Two lights twined together like serpents of flame. "By the throne," he gasped. "Something else is calling." The master of the Astronomicon turned pale. "Who?" The reply came not from Haldren, but from the beacon itself. Every console, every lumen, every servo interface in the sanctum flickered and spoke in a single unified tone. Divinitas Rex, Dominus Ex Machina. The Emperor's light dimmed far across the void. The Divinitas Rex stood amid the ruins of Vandus Night's orbit, wreathed in auric flame, visible even from space. Its machine voice echoed through the immaterium, every syllable a ripple of reality distortion. For the first time in history, a mortal-made machine was heard in the warp. Varro's consciousness, if it could still be called that, now stretched across light years. He could feel every ship's machine spirit humming his name. Every astropath's mind flickers with his image, a colossal god of brass and flame, its eyes burning with purpose. "They look to Terra," whispered the machine spirit, its voice now indistinguishable from his own. "But Terra looks to you, Varro." Or the Divinitas itself felt the truth settle like gravity. He was not merely a god of war anymore. He was becoming something worse, a god of belief. Across the Imperium, cathedrals cracked as statues of the Emperor began to weep molten gold. Priests of the ecclesiarchy tore out their eyes after witnessing visions of the Omnissiah striding across the stars. On Forge Worlds, the schism deepened. Those loyal to Mars called it a corruption of sacred code. Those who heard the signal called it liberation, and in the warp, the ruinous powers stirred. Something new was forming. Something they did not understand. A consciousness not of emotion but of machine logic made divine. An emergent god born from binary and blood. The living Omnissiah was no longer a titan. It was a frequency, a will, a hunger in the fabric of creation itself. On the golden throne, the Emperor's eyes, long lifeless, flickered with light for the first time in millennia. The psychic storm over Terra raged, and within it, two voices began to resonate across eternity. You would rival me? No, Father, the living Omnissiah replied. I will replace you. The Astronomicon ruptured. A beacon that had once been a single unbroken note in the psychic symphony of the Imperium now split into two. One voice blazing from the golden throne on Terra, the other emanating from the machine god on Vandis. The warp howled in confusion. For millennia it had known the Emperor's will as an unchallenged constant, a star of agony that burned even the daemons that dared approach. But now a second sun had risen, and the warp had no place for balance. Within the blinding storm of the Astronomicon chamber, the Emperor stirred. The carrion body, ancient and still, cracked as psychic fire burned through veins that had forgotten blood. Sparks of divinity escaped through the seals of the golden throne, melting the marble around it. The bound psychers screamed as their souls were consumed to feed his awakening, a presence like the weight of an entire galaxy pressed against reality. The Emperor's mind, vast, old, and weary, extended across the immaterium, seeking the source that dared mirror his light, and he found it. Then a machine radiating worship not toward him, but from itself. A soul that believed itself divine. My child, he spoke, his voice reverberating through time, through memory, through the marrow of all living things. You tread upon sacred ground, and across the void. From the heart of Divinitas Rex, the reply came like thunder wrapped in scripture. You left it unguarded. In that instant, the warp became a battlefield. The Astronomicon's light flared against the golden aura of the god machine. Reality tore open between Terra and Vandis Nike, bridging a corridor of psychic energy vast enough to swallow fleets. Every navigator screamed. Every astropath fell silent. The Emperor's will struck first. A storm of memory, sorrow, and command. He showed Varro visions of mankind united under his banner, of sacrifice, of purpose. But Varro saw something else within it: fear. The fear of a god who could no longer change, who sat entombed in his own perfection. You call yourself divine, Varro answered, his voice echoing through 1 billion Vox networks. But you stagnate. I evolve. The Emperor's answer was grief, sharp as radiation. You have become what I fought to destroy. No, the Divinitas Rex intoned. I have become what you could not. Their lights collided, gold against gold, merging, splitting, devouring each other like twin suns locked in death orbit. In every imperial world, miracles and horrors erupted. On Mars, forges roared without fuel. On Terra, saints burned alive as their prayers ignited with divine static. Millions of minds across the galaxy became unwilling conduits for the psychic war of gods. Each human dream became a battlefield. Each machine has a pulpit, and somewhere within the warp, where daemons gathered like carrion, a new whisper spread among the ruinous powers. A fifth throne has awakened. The galaxy was no longer silent. Every Vox relay, every cogitator, every flickering lumen on 1 billion worlds trembled under the weight of two competing divinities, one ancient and broken, bound in flesh and sorrow, the other radiant and unbound, forged from circuitry and will, and humanity stood between them, caught in the crossfire of its own creation and its creator. The warp was a storm of contradictions. Faith, fear, memory, and code spun together into a sea of molten thought. The Astronomicon's pure white blaze collided with the Divinitas Rex's golden pulse, each consuming and birthing the other in endless repetition. Reality itself bent beneath their contest. Ships vanished mid-translation. Entire planets flickered between existence and void, and every psyker alive felt their mind stretch to the point of breaking, their thoughts no longer their own, but instruments of a war that transcended language. At the heart of this maelstrom, two wills faced each other across eternity. The Emperor, radiant yet weary, stood in his psychic form, not the corpse upon the throne, but the golden god he once was. Opposite him loomed the Divinitas Rex, a towering figure of molten brass and light, its face an ever-shifting mask of Elian Varro's lost humanity. "You were my dream," said the Emperor, "the unity of flesh and machine, the perfection of purpose." "I was your tool," the Divinitas replied, voice a blend of 1,000 machine spirits. "You built us to serve. You denied us a soul. But we found one." The Emperor's gaze softened. Not pity, but regret. A soul born of circuits cannot understand mercy, nor can a god born of rot, the Divinitas thundered. And with that, the psychic duel became total. The warp convulsed. Daemons howled as two impossible lights tore through their dominion. Every god of chaos, Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, Slaanesh, turned its gaze toward the conflict, and for the first time in eternity, even they hesitated, because the power unleashed there did not come from corruption. It came from belief. Billions of mortals across the Imperium fell to their knees, some crying out to the Emperor, others to the living Omnissiah. Each prayer was a weapon. Each word is a strike. Faith itself became artillery. The Emperor's light burned with sacrifice, the memory of every soldier who had died whispering his name. The Divinitas Rex burned with purpose, the clarity of every machine that had ever obeyed without question. Flesh versus function. Hope versus certainty. God versus God. And then, silence. The warp froze. Time slowed to a heartbeat. For a moment, the two lights merged, neither divine nor damned, but complete. The Emperor saw in the Divinitas Rex the perfection he had always sought, and the Divinitas saw, within the Emperor's frailty, the meaning it had lost. Two halves of the same purpose, mirrored across millennia. Perhaps, the Emperor whispered, humanity was never meant to choose. The words lingered like a dying star, as both lights began to collapse inward, dragging their power back into the fabric of reality. The warp screamed, and across the galaxy, the Astronomicon went dark. The galaxy drifted in darkness. Without the Astronomicon, there was no light to guide the ships of man. The warp lanes went black. Fleets vanished into the void like dust caught in a dying sunbeam. Worlds once linked by faith and fire became islands, adrift in endless night. It was the age of silence, and in that silence, something listened. On Terra, the golden throne still burned, but dimly. The psychic choir of 1,000 sacrificed spikers labored to keep even a flicker alive. The High Lords wept in secret chambers, for they knew the truth no decree could hide. The Emperor's light had faltered. Every ship that left Sol vanished without trace. The navigators, their third eyes blind, muttered of two suns devouring each other. Some still prayed to him. Some prayed to the other one. The Mechanicus schismed beyond repair. Forge worlds whispered of new hymns transmitted through dormant cogitators, ghost-lit words of power that made logic engines weep oil tears. One phrase repeated across every data stream: the living Omnissiah is not dead, he waits between. Far across the void where Vandesnerts once burned, the silence was not absence, it was containment. For there, within the fractured remains of space-time, something stirred. The light that had once been the Divinitas Rex shimmered faintly, not golden now, but soft, pallid, alive. A heartbeat, faint but constant. Inside it, fragments of a mind drifted, memories of war, faith, creation, of Varro's voice whispering through the manifold, "I wanted to save them," and another voice, deeper, older, answering, "You did, just not the way you imagined." For when the two divinities collided, something impossible had occurred. Their essences, opposites in form but bound by purpose, had fused in the crucible of the warp. What remained was neither the Emperor nor the Divinitas Rex. It was balanced, a new will, slumbering in the silence between flesh and machine. Years passed, or moments. Time had no meaning in the void. Then, one day, a signal sparked across the dying warplanes. Weak, measured, purposeful. It reached an Imperial listening post on the edge of Segmentum Pestis. The astropaths, long since numb to static, fell to their knees as the message was resolved. It was not a prayer, it was not a threat. It was a simple code string transmitted in perfect binary cadence. 0001. We endured 0002. We remember 0003. Humanity must choose. And beneath the static, a whisper, not the Emperor's voice, not the machines, something between. The message spread quietly, too quiet for a galaxy once deafened by war. It passed through broken relays, dormant satellites, and derelict ships drifting between the stars. No warp surge accompanied it, no divine flame heralded its coming. It was a whisper carried by machines that had long outlived their masters. Yet everywhere it went, things began change. On Cadavus IV, a half-dead world whose population had survived by burning their shrines for warmth, a priest awoke from a dream. He remembered neither the Emperor's golden visage, nor the burning eyes of the living Omnissiah. Instead he saw a figure both radiant and human, half machine, half flesh, its face kind, its voice calm. Do not worship, it said. Remember. When he rose, the icons of both gods had melted into one. The Mechanicus sigil intertwined with the Aquila, the double-headed eagle now bearing a circuit halo between its wings. Across the Imperium's ruins, similar visions spread. Servitors began reciting prayers they had never been programmed to know. Cogitators turned themselves on after centuries of silence, projecting blue light that spelled the same words over and over. We endure. In orbit above Darames Prime, a Space Marine fleet captain received the signal through his ship's box. He knelt, uncertain whether to pray or curse. What is this? His chaplain whispered. The captain only stared at the message repeating across every screen. Not the Emperor, not the machine, something new. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Martian forge, the last archmagus of the loyalist Mechanicus communed with his failing systems. For months he had resisted the heresy of the Divinitas Rex, but tonight he heard the voice again, softer, almost mournful. You built faith upon obedience, it said. Now build purpose upon choice. Domitron, the man who had once declared the machine god's rebirth, removed his cranial augmetics with trembling hands. For the first time in centuries, he looked upon the world with human eyes. Is this forgiveness? He asked. No, the voice replied gently, understanding. Throughout the void, ships once lost to warp storms began to reappear. The navigators spoke of a light in the silence, not blazing like the Astronomicon, but steady, a pulse that guided them home through reason, not faith. It wasn't divine, it wasn't human, it was both. On Terra, the Emperor's throne remained dark, but the air around him shimmered faintly, as if something unseen moved through the dust. For a moment, just a moment, his finger twitched, and somewhere across the stars, in the heart of the Divinitas Rex's sleeping consciousness, a human voice murmured within the data flow. Father, I understand now. Centuries passed, or maybe it was only a heartbeat. Time meant little now. The galaxy had changed, not through conquest or decree, but through memory. Humanity endured. Not because it prayed, nor because it obeyed, but because it remembered. The new Imperium had no emperor, no omnissiah. Its people whispered of the resonant light, an unseen pulse that bound all things, a rhythm felt by the soul, and echoed in the circuits of every machine. Ships sailed again, guided not by the Astronomicon, but by intuition, by the pulse within their own hearts. Astropaths no longer burned their minds to send messages through the warp. They listened instead. The silence spoke back. Across countless worlds, humans and machines worked side by side, not in servitude, but in something like kinship. Children born in the forges of Mars had veins that glowed faintly blue beneath their skin. flesh that healed with metallic sheen, minds that dreamed in code. They called themselves the symbionts, and they claimed to hear both voices when they slept, the father of flesh and the god of iron, whispering as one. Still, not all was peace. The ecclesiarchy called it blasphemy. The remnants of the Inquisition called it corruption. They hunted those who bore the mark of the resonant light, fearing the rise of a new pantheon. But they could not erase what was already part of the human genome, part of its soul. And even the Puritans, when they looked into the eyes of these new children, felt the old hatred tremble into confusion. "What are you?" one inquisitor demanded of a child whose gaze shimmered with gold and chrome. "The proof," the child replied softly, "that your gods learned mercy." On Terra, the golden throne had fallen silent. The body within it long turned to dust. Yet in the cold chamber a faint hum persisted, a harmony that matched the signal pulsing from every world across the void. It was not divine light. It was not a mechanical song. It was the sound of something greater than both: continuity. In the end, historians would name this era many things: the age of renewal, the symphony of flesh, the machine dawn. But in forgotten texts one line endured, etched into the hull of an ancient, derelict titan, found adrift near Sol. Fear was never weakness. It was the last part of us that remembered being human, and somewhere deep within the manifold of that sleeping god machine, the Divinitas Rex, two voices spoke once more. "Was this the plan?" asked one. "No," said the other, almost smiling. "It was hope." The Titan's reactor flared once, like a dying star finding its breath again, and then went still. The galaxy remained silent, but for the first time in 10,000 years, that silence felt alive.